Hello everyone, this is Sir Nip here of the Kingdom of Crystal Groves. I haven't been too active in Amtgard recently, so I figured I would make a bat tutorial. This was requested by both of my squires. So let's just go over our materials really quickly. As you can see in the middle, this is what our final result will be. Is an Amtgard speed bat. The materials that you'll need are duct tape, and you'll need this for the bottom two layers of the handle. We have carpet tape, which is used in various different applications. You can get this carpet tape from Walmart or Home Depot. We have, and it's double-sided by the way. We have a cutting tool for our pommels. We have just a pair of scissors, which will definitely come in handy. A ruler, or a tape measure, which is commonly used to measure the length of your core and various other things. We have a pair of calipers. This isn't 100% necessary, but because I make a lot of bats, I like to make sure that they're consistent. So I have these for specifically handles and pommels. I also have two pieces of craft foam. They have an adhesive back. I have Duck brand packing tape. This is a pretty light tape, and the adhesive is pretty good. I have electrical tape. It's not used very much, but it's used to hold down and cinch the covers. I have a piece of blue foam, which is what I'll use for the pommels. And I have a piece of 4-pound foam, which part of it will be used for tipping the sword. And I have some DAP. This will be used to adhere the bat foam to the core. And then this large piece right here is 2.2-pound foam, and it's used to make the tips, and it's, I believe, 1.5 inches wide. All right, that's part one. Part two. Here I have a 33-inch core. You can adjust based on how long you want your bat. At 33 inches, I get for the core, with my current build, I get just under 36 inches for a short weapon. I've already started this process. I've taken duct tape and I've looped around the back of the handle. And what I'll do is I'll actually have 2 layers of this. If you want to add more counterweight to your sword, you can add a 3rd layer or so on and so forth. But my current build only uses 2 layers. You can also adjust how much duct tape that you put on based on how wide of a handle that you want. I currently have it at about 0.85 or 0.847, but I try to shoot for 0.85 thousandths. So I'm going to go do the bottom right now, and I try to do 0.825 thousandths on the bottom. So it's not quite an inch. But as we get a little bit further and further up the core, the goal is to have the next layer be a little bit thinner, so it feels a little bit more natural in your hand. Okay, once I've done that, at some point along the way, what I like to do is I like to check the measurements to make sure that I'm in the right area. So I'm at 0.8, need to add a little bit more. Trying to make sure that I don't have any wrinkles. Okay, so I'm at 0.825, I can rip right there. Alright, that's the end of part 2. Alright, part 3. The next part we're going to do is we're going to prepare the inside tip of the bat on top of the core, because you don't generally want just raw core to be rubbing into whatever tip material you have. So I'll take a piece of 4-pound foam I've cut into about like a rectangle, and it's about a little bit over half an inch. So what I do is I take a piece of double-sided carpet tape, and I'll put it over the end like this, and I'll pull it off so its sticky side is available. And then I'll take the piece of 4-pound foam and put it over the top like that, so it's adhered like that. And now I've already prepped, and I have a piece of packing tape, the Duck brand packing tape, and I'm going to put 1 layer over the top, just like that. And you're going to see I secure it on both sides with a slight amount of pressure. Not too much pressure to completely deform the top. And I'm going to, now, I'm going to cut off the edges of the tape. just like so. It looks like that. And then what I do is I'm going to torque down the top and sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start like this, perpendicular. I'm going to do one rotation around, and then I'm going to squeeze it because I want it to stay on there nice and taut. I'll cut it off, smooth it out, press on the top a little bit to show that it's rigid, and there we go. The core is pretty much ready for a blade to be put on it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a pommel for our core. The first step you need to do is you need to make a tiny end cap piece. Now what you do is you take your core and a Sharpie and you put it on a piece of blue foam and you trace it out and you cut it out with a pair of scissors, and you end up getting a nice little circle like this. Once you have your circle, you're going to take out a piece of carpet tape that you've cut out prior, and you're going to put it on the end. You could either use DAP for this portion, but I prefer carpet tape. It's a little bit less messy. Alright, you just stick it on the end like that. And then we're going to take a piece of craft foam, and we're going to make sure we're going to get 2 even pieces. I've done this enough times. This is usually the width that I'm looking for. I'll measure it in a second just so I can give you kind of a more accurate dimension. So it looks like I normally shoot for about a little bit over 1 inch. Oh wow, they're actually dead on each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 pieces that I just cut out and I'm going to wrap them over the end of the blue foam, and I want it to be perfectly flush, if you can see that. I want to apply a little bit of pressure, but I don't want to be squeezing too hard right now. So that's what the first layer looks like. Oh, I've got a hair in there somehow. Here's the second layer. Alright, now once that's done, I want to take out my blue foam and my marker, and I want to trace another circle . Alright, I have my other circle, and I'm going to take another piece of carpet tape, put it right over the top like that, make sure it lines up on the end, apply some pressure. Now this part, I like to lay my core down on the side, and what I'm doing is I'm going to measure out a piece and I'm going to cut. Now I want to make sure that as I'm adding more and more pieces on, I'm tapering the size downwards so it's getting smaller and smaller. So about right here is where I want to start my cut. Alright. And I want to start where the last piece ended. See, flush with the blue camp foam. I have another 2 pieces to do. I want to measure while I'm doing this to make sure that I'm getting above the 2-inch mark. I have some extra scrap that I have left over from other projects, because sometimes one piece of camp foam is not enough. What I'm shooting for, because right now it's at 2 inches, what I'm shooting for is I would like it to be at 2.25 inches, so when you compress the pommel with tape, it doesn't shrink below the 2-inch mark that we need to achieve. So right now I'm at 2.13. I definitely need more. Can't get this piece off. Alright, let's see if we're there. 2.25, 2.27. So this one's good. So now what I need to do is our pommel looks really ugly and nasty. So what I do is I take a really sharp knife and I want to trim the pommel. You gotta be really careful, that way you don't mess up all the nice work that you did putting on all these layers. Harrison, please close the door. Alright, clean up your mess as you go, that way it's a little bit more tidy, and you can kind of see the shape of the pommel is now looking a little bit better. So what I'll need now is I'll need 3 pieces of packing tape. About yay long. I like to have the packing tape already set aside, so I like to prep pieces, so I'll just stick them to a part of my workbench. Okay, so this next part might need a little bit of explanation. So I'm going to go right across the top, just like how we did the tip before, and I'm going to apply downward pressure. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to cross halfway over the tape with the other piece of tape. I want to make sure that these 3 pieces of tape cover all the gaps. So, see how I have one side left? Foam here, everything else is covered in tape. Alright, once you have your cross pattern and all the foam that was exposed is now covered with tape, we're going to torque wrap. Starting with the top right here. And sometimes just one layer is enough. Sometimes I need to do an extra layer just to make sure it's stable. Alright, take your calipers or your ruler or measuring tape and make sure that you're still above 2 inches, and it looks like I am. About 7 to 5 thousandths extra. Actually, 50 to 70 thousandths extra. So that's really good. You can see the shape came out really nice. Alright, so I'll just be showing you how to attach your blade foam to your core. So the first thing I like to do is measure my blade foam and just make sure that it's a good enough length. This is at a little bit over 23.5 inches, which is pretty good. Oh, by the way, I got this blade foam from Optimum Armory. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing, I have a tapered tube right here, meaning that the hole is larger on this side than it is on this side, and it's perfect for golf club cores because it won't have a rattle in the end, or it'll take a longer time to develop a rattle. So, first thing I want to do is I want to lay my foam down, and I want to measure on the core where I'm going to end up gluing the part. And I mark it with a Sharpie. I'm just showing where the tube goes down onto the core, that way I know where to apply glue. Now some people like to rough up the core with sandpaper in the areas they're going to be gluing, but honestly, like I don't really care to. I don't think it's necessary. The glue, you're not even entirely using the glue to just be the only thing adhering the blade to the core. It's just there to help. I'm using DAP for this part. And I'm not even going to glue the entire length of the blade. I'm just going to glue the top, say, foot. Maybe not even that much, maybe more like 6 to 8 inches. To right above this line. I might not even go right above the line because as you put the tube on, the glue will slide down. So I might go about 2 inches above where that line starts. Alright. So now I'll set that aside. I'll take my tube and I'll put it on. Now for me, I generally like to make sure that my 4-pound tip, half of it, or maybe a little bit less than half, is sticking out the top of the blade. And I'm also going to want to make sure that my tube is on straight. So I like to give a little bit of pressure on each side just to make sure. And I have a little bit of leftover glue, so what I might do is take an old cover that I have and just wipe that off because I don't want it to be getting everywhere. And voila! Hello. Here's the next step in the process. We're going to be finishing off our handle and torquing the blade foam to the core. Now that the glue has dried, one thing that I did off camera was I cut off all the corners of the blade foam, and I cut this portion out of the video because I figured that most people don't have a bandsaw, so it's probably not something that most people that are building their own sticks would be able to do. But what you can do is I set it up on my bandsaw and I just cut off the corners by setting the plane that the foam sits on at an angle, and I used a guide to push my blade foam along and cut all the corners off. So this will probably save you a little bit of weight, but it's not really something that I don't think the average builder would be able to do. So let's just skip that portion. So once my blade foam is glued on, I'll take my craft foam and I'm going to be placing it as the rest of the handle. So I want to be placing it long direction, not this way because it doesn't cover the whole handle, this way. Let's see if I can make this easier to see. I'll be putting it about that distance, and then I want to make sure that I cut there at the location where the duct tape meets. and I want to cut all the way off. Alright, we can save that piece for later. I now want to place this on here, like so, and apply a gentle amount of pressure and loop it around. Now what I want is for the craft foam to slightly come over the edge of the blue foam, because we're going to be torquing down the craft foam. If it's under, I need to add another piece. In this case, it looks pretty good. It's a little bit over on each side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to measure the length of our handle. So currently the handle at the tip of the foam is 11 inches, which is a little long. So as you can see, 12 inches is a little bit above an inch from that location. And we're sitting at 34.5. So if I add my inch and a half cap, we'll be at 36. And we know per Amtgard rules requirements, we need to have the start of the end of the taper to be at 12 inches. It can't be any higher than that. So we need to be very careful on how we cut this taper on our foam. So because we're only at 12 inches right about here, I'm only going to do a small taper all the way around. So time to take the knife and do a small taper. You can see what that looks like right here. Okay, now for the fun part where sometimes I punch myself in the face. So I want to take the tape and I want to do one complete rotation around like so. And now I want to get to the edge, and I don't want to start torquing it, because if I start torquing too early, then my handle is going to technically be too long. So I'm going to start applying pressure. And I like to keep my thumb on top, because if my thumb wasn't here while I'm torquing, the tape could snap and the handle could hit me in the face. Like that. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to continue the torque into the blade foam. Into the handle craft foam. Now, if it starts looking a little bubbly like this at the bottom, you might want to go over with another layer. If I can find the seam. All right, there we go. Perfect. And now look at that. Get a nice taper. Handle's nice and tight. And you can see, nice taper up. Hello, I believe this is part 6 or 7, I think 6. So now we're going to be attaching our cap to our tube. So I didn't show this part again. What I did was I marked out using a template and a marker. I have my 2 pound foam on my 1.5 inch thick piece, and I made a bunch of little circles with my template and I cut them out on my bandsaw. I would personally use a bandsaw because it gives you these really nice edges. It's just nice and smooth. You could use a knife. I've done that in the past, but it ends up looking quite a bit more jagged. So yeah, this is some secret tech. If you guys have ever seen those taco lids before, they are perfect for a template for an Amtgard short. I'll see if I can measure it and see what it actually comes out to, but I believe it's just over 2.5. Yeah, it's 2.56, which is perfect. It's a little bit over this the diameter that it needs to be. So once I've cut out my piece, I have 2 larger squares of carpet tape, and I'll apply them to the bottom of my stab tip, like so. And I'll take the other piece of carpet tape, and I want to make sure that it's been oriented 90 degrees from the other one. That way the little fiberglass threads in there create a cross pattern. I'm then going to take my DAP, if I can find something to open it with. And I'm going to just apply a little bit. You could technically do this part without DAP if you want to make the sword slightly lighter, but I like to make things that I sell last longer. So maybe for a stick for myself, I would just use the carpet tape to hold on the tip. But if I'm going to make this for someone else and I want it to last quite a bit longer, I will put the DAP on. Because I remember there was a point in Amtgard where no DAP was used on the blades. It was just all secured by tape. The old tech. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'll come back in 10 minutes or so and give that glue a chance to cure before we attach, because I want to make sure it gets all nice and tacky. Hello, part 7 or 8, I think 7. I've lost count at this point. So now that our glue is nice and tacky on the top and the bottom, what we're going to do is apply our stab tip like so. I'll know if I waited long enough for the glue to stay tacky, so that by seeing that the tip doesn't kind of pry off of the top. It's on there pretty nice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some packing tape and I'm going to do one loop around about 2 inches down from where the, actually just 1 inch down from where the tip connects to the blade foam. I'm not applying any pressure at all for this because I don't want to be compressing the blade foam. Looks like that. The reason I do this is sometimes the tape has a hard time sticking to the foam. So I'm now going to do, just like I did the pommel, I'm going to do a cross pattern, and I'm going to want it to connect to that piece below, that loop below. This time I will apply some pressure. And if you do this, if you want to limit your weight, you do it where you barely have any overlap. Because when we're making the best speed bat we can, every little piece of tape and little bit of weight matters. Same thing with the pommel. I'm making sure that I'm covering all the gaps. A little technique I like to do is when I have the sides sticking up like that, I attach the middles and then I just roll my hand across. So I'm not trying to avoid as many wrinkles as possible. So it's going to look like that. Now, if I really wanted to make something for a tournament that would only last, say, a day, but it'd be as light as possible, we would stop here because this foam is nice and durable. But it would start to tear at this point where the tape is. So, for the sake of making something that's going to last, we're going to skin the whole blade. So I want to take my tape and I want to stick it just over the end at the top and at the bottom. I can use a knife here or a pair of scissors. I want to pull it not too tight across, and I want to slide my finger up the top and the bottom, and then I want to roll my fingers over. Want to move it slightly, and now we're going to take the next piece and we're just going to go slightly over the other. And if we do this right, at the end we won't need an extra piece of tape. We're trying to be nice and careful, not to get try to avoid as many wrinkles as possible. It's not necessarily a problem, if too much of a problem if you get wrinkles, but try to avoid. Alright, one more piece. Oop, I got a wrinkle in there, but it still looks pretty good. Alright, now once the blade is completely covered in the skin, what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top, and I'm going to do some spiral wrapping on the way downwards. Now I want to make sure I provide a little bit of overlap, but I want to provide more overlap than I was providing for the skinning up here, because if I don't, then over time the spiral wrap, if I don't provide enough overlap, will start to bite into the blade and will actually cause your blade to fail up here. Once you strike something, it might tear into the foam. So let's do one. I almost do, it's really hard to see on camera. I would say about at least a quarter inch of overlap. I would probably even do more. I'd probably say a third of the tape's width. And we go down about a third of the sword. And there you go. All we have left to do is add a grip tape, some, you can either do a cloth cover at the bottom or a cloth tape cover, and then a cloth cover up here. Now, I don't think I'm going to show you guys how to sew in this series, but yeah, that's how you make a nip speed bat. Yeah, thank you.